we're going to do some probability here. What are the odds with a deck of 52 cards that I could cut to the 7 of spades? So 52 cards, one chance, that is the odds of 1 in 52. So we're going to go like that, and boom, one cut. But what are the odds that I could change every single card into the 7 of spades? What? All right, so today we are going to crush 2 lessons in one. We are going to compare experimental probability with theoretical probability. Let's go. All right, so probability is the likelihood of something happening, the possibilities of something happening. An example would be with this coin. If you flipped it, and you could say, what are the odds that it would be heads? What are the odds that it would be tails? That is probability. What is the likelihood of something happening? So in this video, I'm going to explain what theoretical probability is and what experimental probability is. And then I'm going to show you a few examples of each and how they differ. The theoretical probability is what theoretically the probability should be. So the formula for that is theoretical probability is the number of favorable outcomes by the number of possible outcomes. So it is a fraction, which means you could divide the 2 if you want, or you could leave it as a fraction. So if I said, what is the probability that you would flip a head? Well, we don't actually have to do the experiment. We are theoretically saying what the probability could be. So how many favorable outcomes would there be? Well, I said heads, so there's only one head, so the answer for that would be 1, and you'd put that on the top part. And how many possible outcomes are there? Well, you could flip a head or you could flip tails, and that would give you 2 possible outcomes. So the answer for this question is 1 out of 2. You could translate this fraction into a percent or a decimal. So 1 over 2 would be 0.5. That as a percent is 50%. So you have theoretically a 50% chance of getting a head, 50% chance of getting a tail. Another example would be using this dice, a 6-sided dice. If I said, what is the theoretical probability that you would roll a 2? Well, how many favorable outcomes are there? Well, there's only 1 2 on the dice, so there would only be 1. And how many possibilities are there for different outcomes? Well, there are 6. So the probability of rolling that number would be 1 out of 6. If I said, what is the probability of rolling an even number? Well, there are 3 even numbers and there are 6 numbers altogether. So 3 out of 6 would be your probability for that. Am I making sense yet? Good. So theoretical probability is just theoretically, what should the odds be? Without doing any experiment, what should the odds be?
I'm still kind of confused.
Well, here's one more example. If I had 4 handkerchiefs, all different colors, what would the probability be if I stuffed them into my hand? What would the probability, if you picked one out, that it would be blue? Well, it would be 1 out of 4, or 25%. What would the probability be that all those handkerchiefs molded and fused together? I'd say highly unlikely.
Well, what's experimental probability?
That's a great question. Experimental probability is actually experimenting on the probability. Okay, so the formula for experimental probability is, on the top you would write the amount of times an outcome occurs, and on the bottom you would write the amount of times that you conducted an experiment. So we could go back to the coin. If I said, hey, we're going to use experimental probability to see how many times you can get heads. Okay, so let's just say we're going to do it 2 times, just for whatever. So experimental probability, flip a coin, and we just got a heads. Okay, we're going to flip it again, and we got a tails. That's kind of funny. So our experimental probability is actually the same as theoretical probability, which would be 1 out of 2, because we got a heads once, and we got a tails once, so it was 1 out of 2. We did the experiment 2 times. 1 time we got the head.
Could you flip the coin 10 times to see what the experiment would show?
Yes, you could do that. Experimental probability, you could flip the coin 10 times and find out the outcomes for each one. So the bottom line is the experimental probability will likely be different than your theoretical probability. Another example using the dice would be, hey, what are the odds that if you rolled a dice that you would roll a 2? Well, we could roll the dice 6 times or like 20 times, it doesn't really matter. So if I rolled the dice 6 times and I got a 2 once, well, the experimental probability is the exact same as the theoretical probability. If I rolled a 2 4 times, well, the experimental probability would be 4 out of 6. Once again, experimental probability is just based off of the experiment, okay? Not theoretically what the probability should be. The theoretical probability of rolling a 3 would be 1 out of 6. But if we wanted to do experimental probability, we'd have to roll the dice 6 times and see what the experiment showed us. And once again, if you took the 4 handkerchiefs and you put them into your hand, what is the experimental probability that you would pull a red one out of your hand? Well, the answer would be nothing. All right, so that is the final video for this unit. We tackled 2 lessons in one, and I hope that that makes sense. Once again, please let me know down below in the comments if you are picking up when I am laying down, or if you like the magic tricks. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and best of luck with your probability questions. See you later.